Good morning. I'm Mike Van Dusen, Executive Vice President of the Woodrow Wilson Center. I want to welcome all of you here. We often like to say when we start programs at the center that the subject matter is very much in the Wilsonian tradition. Woodrow Wilson is the only American president we've had who had a PhD. He was both a university president, as you know, and the 28th president of the United States. And we always like events that bring the best of scholarship and the best of public policy together. And I want to thank Sonia and Yerzu Kim for helping to put together today's program. Universities are at the crossroads. Universities are absolutely critical in terms of conveying technology, and technology is moving at an extraordinarily rapid pace. Universities are facing numerous pressures in the face of knowledge-based economics. They need to serve a growing number of students with declining financial resources. We are at a time where I indicated advance in the sciences and technologies offer universities great opportunities for research. That often has to be a public-private partnership, and it's often hard to put that together. The challenges universities face are no longer local or national. Indeed, they are global. Research communities, always international, are now increasingly so because of advances in communication. Student bodies are drawn from all parts of the world. Indeed, every big university is an international enterprise. And knowledge-based economics in which they will find employment are global in scope. What is the current status of universities, and what are the universities like to look like in the future? To answer these questions, we need an international conversation, and that is the purpose of our program today. It fits right in, as I indicated, with the mission of the center. We judge a program by who you get in the room, and we have a good group of people to discuss this issue. Again, I want to thank Yerzu Kim, a scholar in the past and a scholar very recently at the center, for his idea for this event. He is a philosopher from Kyung University in Seoul, and he was here, I guess, about a year ago as a public policy scholar. This idea meshed very much with the interest of three programs here at the center. The program on America and the global economy, directed by Kent Hughes, Dr. Kent Hughes in the back. U.S. Studies program, directed by Sonia Michel up here in the front, and our program on science and technology innovation, chaired by Dave Rajewski, who's on his way to a synthetic biology conference, I believe, in Massachusetts during a portion of this week. Well, we've have assembled a distinguished group of educated leaders from Asia and the United States, and we're immensely fortunate that they were all able to travel to be here. And I regret very much that Dr. Choue from Korea got to New York and had to turn around right away to go back to Korea to have an operation. It was an operation he had to have in the past, but so I guess he didn't want to do it in the United States, but we are really appreciative of the effort he made to try and get here, and sorry that he could not be with us. We wish him well and hope that he's over his illness, and that the operation he had in Seoul has returned him to good health. I hope you have a very productive morning. I hope to stop by later on, but Sonia, I want to turn it over to you, and thank you again, Yerzu, for your help in putting this together, and I hope you have a good discussion. I'll hope to stop in. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you again, all of you, for being here this morning. I think we are in for a very lively discussion. I just wanted to say a couple of words about the format. Dr. Yursu Kim is going to moderate the morning session. You have, in front of you, you have a yellow sheet with bios of all the participants and a green sheet on the back of which lists the questions that we're going to be dealing with in each panel. And we're going to ask particular participants to lead off. We'll discuss each question in a round. Each of the panelists will have an opportunity to weigh in on each question, and we're going to ask a particular participant to start out the discussion on each question. After the first two questions, we're going to open it up to the audience so you can ask questions and make comments and join the conversation. We'll do that for about 15 or 20 minutes, then we'll go back to the questions, back to the panelists, and do a couple of rounds of questions, and then again open it up to the audience. After at 12:15, this panel will end. Lunch will be available to all of you outside. Please help yourselves, and you can eat back in here or anywhere downstairs on the fourth floor. And then we'll reconvene again at 2 o'clock for the second panel. So I'm delighted to turn it over to Yursu Kim and add my thanks to that of Mike for developing the idea for this conference and developing the framework and the questions that I think are going to lead to a very productive discussion. So I turn it over to you. I'm sorry. I forgot. Dr. Ryan Song from the Faculty of Law at Kyung University is going to read some remarks by Dr. Choue, who was unable to be with us today. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm. Hi, my name is Ryan Song, a law professor at Kyung University. Dr. Choue, President Choue, was supposed to be here, but as you've heard, medical emergencies kind of compelled him to go back. He felt so bad that before he left, he told me to detail his medical problems. But at some point, I thought that's too much detail, President. So I will not bore you with that. But I spoke to the assistant this morning. He's still staying at the hospital, but he seems to be doing well. So it's certainly good news. Distinguished guests, thank you. We are gathered here to consider the topic of the future of the universities. The future of universities is certainly a matter of great interest to everyone in this room. It is also a matter of common concern for all the intellectuals confronted with the future of the university, society, and humanity in this end phase of the modernity. This interest is, of course, nothing new. The mission and role of institution of higher learning have been questioned and debated by those engaged in the search for truth. This has been the case since the medieval Italy saw the establishment of the first university of the Western world in Bologna, which spurred the establishment of the higher learning institutions across Europe. In the East, too, similar concerns surfaced in and around in the 11th century. Intellectuals at the Sewon, which is a hall of learning in China, and Seungwon, a hall of Buddhist monasteries in Japan, which are increasingly transformed into places of learning, also faced questions about the purpose of the higher education. A concern with knowledge and values makes Seodang and Hangyo, which is traditional Korean archetypes of institutional learning, flourish around the same time. The pursuit of truth and the creation of values are important matters. These are the lofty goals that these institutions of learning, the archetypes of universities in both East and West, have all focused upon. Learned men have recognized the unlimited possibilities of scholarship and have passionately pursued the objective and universal way of thinking. Because these men have nurtured their interest to an exclusionary degree, they have earned the university the epithet of ivory tower. This term most often carries a negative connotation, I'm afraid. Sainte-Beuve first applied the term to intellectual pursuit that was divorced from reality. If truth and values that are pursued in the universities are limited to learning that does not engage reality, the university can lead to little more than intellectual isolation. This is a common perception of the ordinary people today. The burden of this reputation of the university and scientific institutions has been alleviated somewhat by expanding communication with the real world beyond academia. A conscious effort on the part of universities to communicate the role of applied sciences in the daily lives of ordinary men has strengthened the beneficial social concept of the ivory tower. various forms of polytechnic institutes and professional schools, and the introduction of practical curricula in integrated universities have expanded the practical aspect of learning. Nevertheless, there are concerns that these trends weaken the real meaning and purpose of the university. Today, in times of rapidly expanding globalization of the market, industry, and politics, those universities that would normally guard the purity of learning are experiencing difficulties. This is becoming an irresolvable anguish of the university. This crisis among the humanities have been an urgent issue around the globe for quite some time. Philosophy is disappearing from the campus. There do not seem to be many universities that would attempt to breathe new life into pure disciplines such as aesthetics, theology, and anthropology. There even seems to be a crisis among pure social science such as economics, sociology, and political science. These tendencies to move away from the more theoretical disciplines are particularly pronounced in societies like Korea that have single-mindedly pursued modernization and globalization processes. The reality today at the university is that it is becoming increasingly difficult for professors to tell students to dedicate themselves fully to the pursuit of truth. Recently, a student from one of the best universities in Korea withdrew from school, denouncing such a reality. He was a third-year student at an age full of dreams and goals. Mass media in Korea gave this incident extensive coverage. Even though it was an act of one single student, it was difficult to treat this event as merely personal to him. I myself have heard similar laments from students on many occasions when I was teaching. You can imagine what a great shock this is for a person in the academia. This situation clearly illustrates a crisis in intellectual pursuit, which seems to be a catch-22 situation. Pure sciences have values in themselves. As long as a university continues to exist, we must explore the infinite path of the imagination and of creation. Particularly today, as the globalization of market and industry is accelerating, pure science is gradually losing ground. However, intellectualism that ignores the practical application of learning and knowledge stagnates as mere academic fantasy. Society does not want this, especially where higher learning relates to the market, industry, and politics. This is the point on which applied science with an eye towards reality fastens. It places a value on the practical utility of learning. However, just as intellectual pursuit should be translated into practical, applied sciences must not ignore erudition, imagination, and purity. In other words, reality is not and should not be the only starting point for the scientific thinking. The infinite intellectual world of what is not seen and what cannot be touched constitutes the basis of scientific imagination. A newspaper report I read several months ago covered an academic plan at the Wharton School of Business at the University of Pennsylvania. The school, which has been at the forefront of applied sciences, evidently plans to include the humanities in its curriculum. I think there was at the basis of this plan a realization that all development, whether corporate or individual, must be based on basic sciences. I think there was a recognition also that the applied sciences are strengthened when they are based on the understanding of the human being. Similarly, in Korea, CEO humanities lecturers are enjoying popularity. CEOs from various companies are saying, we're reading Shakespeare and Sartre in order to ensure a better tomorrow for ourselves and for our businesses. They're studying Confucius and Kyung, a Korean philosopher. Pure science found life in the wake of liberation from God, magic, and tradition. Applied sciences grew in the midst of criticism of the abstract quality of pure sciences. The value placed on each of these have created some discord within our universities and within societies, and this discord is not likely to be easily reconciled. Even so, integrating the pure and the practical is one of the key tasks of the university community. This divide is an obstacle that stands in the way of a better future of the university. Science, whether pure or practical, is a tool for human beings. The acquisition of knowledge of human beings, by human beings, and for human beings must be the ultimate raison d'etre of the science. Therefore, science must explore the relationship between human beings and the world that surrounds them. It must work towards a sustainable relationship between human beings and the world. The implication for the future of university, therefore, is twofold. On the one hand, there is a need for active communication between pure sciences and applied sciences. On the other hand, there lies the question of the possibility of being for the university community and future society. The university has its basis in society. Whereas society was previously distinguished in one sense by national boundaries, this is no longer the case in the tide of globalization. We have already set foot into the world of interdependence, and boundaries of all kinds are quickly disappearing. There are myriads of problems that await solutions in the 21st century societies and on our earth. Poverty and hunger, human rights, human security, disease and contagion, climate changes, and depletion of resources are all issues that must be addressed by global society together. There are many problems that we must all solve together. The future needs to be forged continually by crossing the boundaries between private and public interests. This is where the university of the future must actively focus its attention. Each human being naturally pursues his own interests. Part of this pursuit necessarily includes a successful adaptation to his society. Fame, success, wealth, and power are strong motivation for human and societies. But if each man pursues only his private interests, the basis of our collective existence would be compromised. As a result, conflicts erupt and nature is destroyed. Human lives are therefore endangered. These are the times when selfless efforts in the public interest are needed more than ever. It is the purpose and responsibility of the science and the university to attain and maintain a harmony among men and among societies, especially in the face of these tensions. One way to resolve this tension between private and public interest is for universities to enable the processes of communication, fusion, and creation. In the words of philosopher, diplomat, and educational theorist Wilhelm von Humboldt, the university is an institution that creates the culture of human society. We must create this cultural world through a union of pure and applied sciences. We must do so by realizing the social responsibility of the universities and by promoting its global eminence. It is my hope that the wisdom of and discussion among all of the participants here today will illuminate the way for the future of the universities. Inwon Choue, President of the Kyung University.
Thank you, Dr. Song, for this the introductory remarks by Professor Choue, President of Kyung University. I think that they would be very pertinent for the discussion we would be having today, this morning. I'm very happy to be back here at Woodrow Wilson Center and Washington, D.C. Both are my favorite places in the United States. And besides that, I'm very honored to be back, to be moderating this morning's session of the roundtable, The Future of Universities, Universities of the Future. It is a mouthful, and I hope the large scale with which within which we have placed our roundtable would not disturb you in any way. This morning's session really deals with the future of universities, and the focus of this session will be the civilizational, technological, demographic transformations which are taking place today, and the nature of challenges these transformations present to the modern university. When I say modern university, I'm thinking of the quasi-standard model of university that have been dominant in the world during the much of the 20th century. It has origins partly in Europe, but particularly in the 19th century Germany, the 19th century and then early 20th century Germany. But it really came to flowering in this country, in the United States, perhaps during the 1930s, and so it has been model of a great research university with extensive undergraduate education. The university functioned as the engine of change for the United States and the rest of the world as well. It has become the envy and a model for the world, including my own country, Korea. It has been the vehicle through which higher education has been brought to so many young people all over the world, around 70 million young people by 1990, and according to some estimates, 150 million young people by year 2020. Furthermore, it has been the locus of new knowledge and innovations from I could give examples of the MRI medical, the wonder device, and the laser, the FM radio, and countless other inventions which have made the modern world in which we are living so much more livable for most of us. But the world has been changing profoundly during the last 20 or 30 years, and these changes are requiring the modern university to make new and radical changes. And these transformative changes include, I will go through the list, the rise of global society, the evolution of knowledge-based society, rapid development of information and communication technology, and the changing nature of the state, the market, and commerce, and finally, the rapid shift in world demographic trends. The university has always given ample proof of its vitality over the centuries and its ability to change and to induce change and progress in society. But it will require wise deliberations and the decisions of all the stakeholders, particularly those of the leaders of the modern university, if it is to make the radical and innovative changes successfully. This is really the rationale for this round table. I hope we will be able to have a successful meeting. Dr. Michel has given us the format according to which we will conduct this round table. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Dr. Koichiro Matsuura, who has been Director General of UNESCO until last November. So it has been only a few months that he has been away from UNESCO. So all the profound ideas which have come out of UNESCO regarding the future of education, higher education, are still fresh in his mind. So we hope he will give us a lead-off discussion on the rise of global society and the university. Dr. Matsuura. Again.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Kim. First of all, I would like to thank Woodrow Wilson Center and also Kyung University for taking initiative to organize today's seminar on the future of universities. Very, very important theme for today's world. As Dr. Kim has just said, I was the head of UNESCO in the last 10 years until the end of November. UNESCO covers 4 key areas in the social sector: education, culture, the sciences, and the communication. One of the important conferences UNESCO organized just before my departure was indeed World Conference on Higher Education. We organized it in July 2009, therefore just 1 year ago, with the participation of more than 1,000 people coming from more than 150 countries, including many education ministers and university presidents and lecturers and professors. In fact, we covered all subjects related to higher education, and I'm very happy to report to you. One of the themes was the role of higher education, in particular universities, in a globalizing world. I'm very happy to be here to participate in further in-depth discussion of that theme, namely the future of universities in a globalized world. Perhaps I should quote one of the passages adopted at the end of the conference, which refers to the role of higher education in today's world. It's a bit complicated phrase, but I would like to read it out. Then I will try to paraphrase it in my way. I quote, faced with the complexity of current and future global challenges, higher education has a social responsibility to advance our understanding of multifaceted issues which involve social, economic, scientific, and cultural dimensions, and our ability to respond to them. I continue to believe the universities, or more broadly, higher education institute continue to have a very, very important role to play in today's world. Not only producing a group of intellectual leaders, but also producing large mass of intellectuals in today's world. Of course, when we analyze what's taking place in developed countries like the United States, Japan, and Korea, is quite different from what's taking place in developing countries, in poor countries in particular. One of the themes we discussed in the World Conference last year was fast rising demand for higher education, in particular in the developing world. In the developed world, we have already achieved a very large number of university student enrollment. In Japan, it's 50%. I understand it's 70%, 75% in Korea, one of the highest in the world. Normally, developed countries have university enrollment of between 50% and 75%, whereas in Africa it's only 5%. And in other developed regions, it varies, but from 5 to 20%. So we can't discuss in a global way, or a general way, the role of universities in a country where the enrollment is only 5%, compared to 50 to 75%. But today, since we come from developed countries, perhaps I should concentrate on the future universities in the developed world. For the time being, forgetting universities in the developing world, although this is a very, very important theme worldwide. But I would nevertheless argue what I have read out from the conclusion from the declaration adopted at the conference on the World Conference on Higher Education 1 year ago applies not only to universities in the developed world, but also to universities in the developing world. I do think universities must continue to play a key role in producing large mass of intellectual people, including intellectual leaders in global society, who are indeed responsible citizens, responsible leaders. And one market phenomena in global societies is we are witnessing more and more interchange of students, more and more students wishing to study abroad, and more universities ready to accept more and more foreign students. As Dr. Kim said, the United States has been providing for a very good model in that context, accepting many foreign students, whereas other developed nations, in particular Japan and others, have not necessarily followed that model. But I have been back in Japan in the last 6 months. I'm very happy to discover Japan is also trying to catch up with the United States and other leading European nations, accepting more and more foreign students. Japan's goal is to accept 300,000 university students, foreign university students, by 2020, while Japan now has 120. Therefore, Japan aims to almost triple the number of foreign students studying in Japan by 2020, which is a very, very good sign. And also, in that context, Japan has been fast introducing education in English. One of the impediments, one of the major obstacles for foreign students, for foreign university students to come to Japan is they would have to attend classes in Japanese, very difficult language to learn. But now more universities are giving classes in English, which is a welcome development. Therefore, I do hope, while the United States and other European nations which accept many foreign students traditionally continue to do so, new developed nations, Japan and others, will accept more foreign students, in particular from the developing world, so that the world will have more globalized citizens produced in many countries. Again, the United States has is a very good model. Of course, we have to be careful about the brain drain. Those well-educated students in foreign countries must go back to their countries of origin to make a contribution to their society. So how to assure that and how to prevent brain drain is becoming more and more important in the context of more intensified international exchange of students. Perhaps I should stop here without going further. Nevertheless, I would like to confirm once again the United States has established a good model for accepting more and more foreign students who are providing quality education to foreign students, which should be followed by other developed nations, so that the world will be equipped with a more globalized or more global-minded intellectual leaders. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Matsuura. Would any member of the panel like to react to what Dr. Matsuura has just said? No?
Oh, good morning. Thank you for your very insightful remarks. I think from one other additional perspective, that the rise of global societies has an impact on higher education in general, and certainly in the United States, in that some of the other developments we'll talk about this morning, in particular information and communication technology and the rise of knowledge-based societies, has, by the nature of those developments, I think, made education in general more accessible, at least theoretically, if not pragmatically. And I think one of the impacts this has on the mission of institutions in general is that, at least in our case, we have been looking more outward as opposed to looking inward, which has been traditional in the United States, I think. And some of the programs that you mentioned, while they're very good, have been ancillary as opposed to essential to what we do. And I think with the democratization of education globally, it's going to be incumbent upon us to revisit missions to see how they fit with the more global access and the responsibility that we'll have going forward.
For those of you who may not know, Dr. Pepicello is president of University of Phoenix, which has taken the rise of the information and the communication technology very much to heart, and it's here it's it's the biggest private university in the United States. Would anyone else like to comment? Then I think in the interest of keeping time, we will move on to the next issue, which is the evolution of knowledge-based society. The knowledge-based society, emergence of knowledge-based society has been one of the seminal changes of the 20th century, and this is something that university, which has traditionally been associated with the production of knowledge and the dissemination of knowledge and so forth, we must really deal with. And to lead off the discussion on this issue, I would like to call on Dr. Duderstadt. Dr. Duderstadt is President Emeritus of the University of Michigan, and he has been on so many presidential commissions on education that he will be able to give us a good overview of the issue.
Thank you very much. I will cast aside my earlier participation in the Spellings Commission. The new commission I'm on will be announced in another week or two. At the request of Congress, the National Academies has launched a major study on the future of the American Research University. It will be chaired by Chad Halliday, former CEO of DuPont. But since we're just putting together the charge for that, I can't comment on that. So I thought, although I always hate to use PowerPoints, maybe one way to move through this very quickly is to share with you a presentation that I made 2 weeks ago to several dozen presidents of Chinese universities. on the future of the university, the topic that we're discussing today. Forces of change. Well, there are a great many. Most of them are going to be covered in our discussion this morning. Let me just touch bases on a few of these that are driven very much by this idea of a global economy driven by knowledge. I think we all know, and we've known it long before Tom Friedman's book, The World is Flat, that today our world has entered a period of very rapid and quite profound economic, social, and political transformation. At the basis of all of it's a radically new system for creating wealth. It depends on the creation and application of new knowledge, and therefore upon the presence and impact of educated people and their ideas. For that reason, I think most nations are realizing the importance of a very strong system of tertiary education, that their strength, their prosperity, their welfare depends on it. But it also depends upon not simply an educated populace, but also the capacity to generate new knowledge on world-class research universities, with the capacity to discover new knowledge and just as significantly transfer knowledge into the marketplace. We heard about globalization. The quote I like to use is from the National Intelligence Report of several years ago that said that, quote, "We see globalization, the growing interconnectedness reflected in the expanded flows of information, technology, capital goods, services, and people throughout the world, as an overarching megatrend, a force so ubiquitous that it will substantially shape all other major trends in the world of 2020. And we'll see that as we go through the day's discussion. Demographics, we've also had a background of that. Here the challenge is in the developed world. We have aging populations. In part, the decline of traditional young college students in many nations is a challenge to higher education, but perhaps even more is the fact that aging populations don't necessarily have the same social priorities as do more balanced populations, and we see it in this country and in parts of Europe, shifting of social priorities away from investment in the future, the needs of the elderly. In sharp contrast, much of the developing world is characterized by a young population who see their future threatened by the absence of educational opportunities. And these global disparities in wealth and economic opportunities are driving population migration, immigrant minority populations that will diversify and challenge existing cultures, economies, politics, and institutions such as universities. Changing educational needs. The education requirements of the knowledge economy are raising the goals from secondary to tertiary to postgraduate to lifelong learning. The governors of this country several years ago put it this way: the driving force behind the 21st century economy is knowledge, and developing human capital is the best way to ensure prosperity. We all, or at least some of us in this room, remember the space race of the 1960s. We now have a skills race. It's a powerful political force, both in the United States and abroad. But there's a challenge here. The Europeans call this the conflict between massification and league tables. Massification is the term they use to significantly broaden participation in higher education. Beyond that, for simply the elite, to where it characterizes much of the population. And yet, at the same time, they measure the quality of their institutions by the Shanghai Jiaotong rankings or the London Times or, God forbid, U.S. News and World Report, which they call league tables. And so what they're doing is they're expecting their universities to provide more opportunities for education, to become more nationally renowned as world-class research universities, and to do both of these while reducing the burden on taxpayers who face other public spending priorities such as health care, retirement, and security. Mission differentiation. Again, higher education faces many stakeholders that have quite different needs. Young students, the professions, adult learners, from society, teaching, research, economic development, cultural richness. And these demand a diverse, not adverse, ecosystem of institutional types. In the United States, because of the size of our nation, its higher education system, and the absence of an overarching federal plan or management of that, we have naturally developed a highly diverse system that seems more capable of responding to these needs. This is not the case in much of Europe, where most European universities view themselves as descendants, if not of Bologna, of Humboldt's University of Berlin, and they all view themselves as world-class knowledge institutions. And yet a differentiated system of higher education is absolutely necessary to accomplish the twin goals I just mentioned, massification and world-class quality. Many people believe that higher education is the next of our economic sectors to undergo a massive restructuring, driven by economic, geopolitical, demographic, and technological forces, similar to those experienced by other sectors, communication, energy, and as we all saw over the last couple of years, the banking industry. In some nations, there's a movement towards a revenue-driven, market-responsive higher education system. This is happening both in North America and Europe, to be sure, because there's simply no way that our current tax system can meet the needs of an aging population and at the same time support both the extension of educational opportunity and quality in the face of other needs. In fact, in this country today, in the United States, 55% of the support of higher education is from the private sector, unlike Europe, where it's less than 10%. We're already seeing the impact of market forces on public policy and public investment in determining the future of our institutions. This is, I think, going to drive paradigm shifts. This is a topic for this afternoon, but let me kind of give you a quick preview. Over the next generation, there are many who conjecture the university will change so much it will no longer be recognizable in today's terms. We hear terms like global universities, meta universities, technology. But let me give you just a case study from history. My institution, which in 1850 looked like this with cows grazing on the center of our campus. 50 years later, it could be on a different planet. That's Michigan at the turn of the century. That's what it looked like just after the Second World War. That's what it looked like several years ago. And this is what it looks like today. It's kind of taken over the community it lives in. I one time got in trouble by characterizing the contemporary American university as this fragile academic organism delicately balanced between the football stadium on one end of the campus and the academic medical center on the other, and you see this is actually how my institution is evolving. So we will have to consider entirely new paradigms, forces like lifelong learning, the emergence of truly global institutions which define their public purpose in global rather than regional or national terms, meta-universities which no longer are tied necessarily to campuses, and in fact an idea that I'll float in front of you in the afternoon, the possibility of really a 21st century analog to the Renaissance, in which not only do we enter an age in which everybody in the world is connected with one another, but they have access to knowledge which would have been unthinkable even a few years ago, as well as to learning tools, all built on a infrastructure of technology that continues to increase at a rate of 100 to 1,000-fold a decade, and will continue to do so for as far into the future as we can see. So that kind of sets the stage for this, and I'll stop at this point and turn the chair back to you.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Duderstadt, the very interesting lead of discussion. Any member of the panel like to say something? Yes, Dr. Sarah.
Oh, thank you very much for a very, very comprehensive presentation. I have one particular question with regard to lifelong learning. What kind of concrete programs do you have to meet that need, lifelong learning?
Interestingly enough, the most important recommendation that came out of the year-long Spellings Commission, the National Commission on the Future of Higher Education in this country several years ago, was to call on democratic societies to recognize their responsibility to provide learning opportunities throughout a person's life, from very early years to late in life, from cradle to grave, as they put it at one point. This is clearly important. Not only is human lifespan being extended by modern medicine, but the change in driven by technology and by globalization is driving very significantly the change in the skills required of people. If you look at education as a lifelong need, perhaps requiring roughly 20% of someone's time throughout their lives, which are what some estimates suggest, it's clear that our current structure of higher education, which in most of our traditional institutions is primarily designed to educate the young, in this country to socialize them, or as Lord Rugby said, to transform savages into gentlemen, the purpose of the British public school, you realize for the most part that we're not really well aligned to that, with one exception, and that happens to be the for-profit sector. And I was talking with our colleague from the University of Phoenix, because it has established a very effective model of not simply how to finance, but provide quality higher education opportunities to working adults. That model, I think, will more and more characterize much of the future of higher education. It will be a significant challenge to those of our institutions which are heavily moored on a campus to provide those lifelong learning opportunities. And my own sense is that we're going to have to do it not by bringing our students back to our campuses, but emulating many of the secrets to the success of the University of Phoenix and using technology in order to provide learning and new skills for people in the workplace with family responsibilities.
Any more comments from the panel? With the permission of Dr. Michel, I'm going to postpone the opening up to the general audience, the floor for discussion, because next issue is very much related to the issues we have been discussing. And that issue is information and communication technologies. And we have to lead off the discussion Dr. King, who is Provost of University of Michigan, Professor of Information, perfect man to lead off the discussion. Dr. King.
Well, thank you. Basically, what I want to do is tell you a story, and the story has to do with cellular telephony. Most of you have something like this. I've seen most of you getting it out and looking at it, so I know you have them. This thing has been around about 20 years, and it's a pretty profound change, but it's more of a change than most people recognize, and the lesson that comes out of that change is the story I want to tell for higher education. Cellular telephony was actually invented in 1946 by the AT&T Bell Laboratories in the United States. The people who invented it at that time were basically looking to increase channel capacity in the existing wireless telephony business, which AT&T helped run. They had a business in what was called radio common carrier, and that business was seen by the AT&T leadership as a very restricted business just for commercial use. And if you see a film that I have a copy of that was made in 1946 about wireless telephony, all of the application of that telephony was for business purposes only, business and emergency services. There was no personal use of this technology. It wasn't for that purpose. Now, if you remember back to the days of wireline telephones were essentially a station-based public utility. In fact, those of you in the United States will remember that you could make a long-distance telephone call station to station, which was less expensive, or person to person. Person to person was a billing convention. Of course, people only talk to other people. Nobody talks to a station, but the infrastructure was a station-based infrastructure to which the user came. So the idea was that this big company and a number of small independent operators in certain locations would operate a set of stations, and there were many of them located in gas stations and roadsides and so forth in the form of public telephones. And if you needed to make a telephone call, you went to the station and used the station to make the call. The infrastructure did not belong to you. In fact, it was impossible for you to own any part of it. It was owned entirely by the utility. And if you picked up the telephone and turned it over and looked at the bottom of it, it said property of either Western Electric or Automatic Electric, not for sale. You couldn't own this thing. Well, this actually created an interesting problem. AT&T never realized what it had with cellular telephony. When the company was broken up in the 1980s, they gave the cellular telephony business to the residual regional Bell operating companies, and they ended up selling it mostly to private investors, entrepreneurs like Craig McGaw and others. And the telephone companies ended up buying back cellular telephony at very, very much higher prices than they sold it for some years later. Now, this is the story I want to tell about this. It's not just a story about an industry that got it wrong, that invented cellular telephony. This is true, by the way, of every telephone company around the world. None of them understood what they had with cellular telephony, and they all missed it. This is true, including what happened in Finland and in Sweden with the Nordic mobile telephony and the rise of the GSM standard, which is the most common standard in the world now. They all got it wrong because they all had this idea that telephony is a utility that is station-based and the user comes to the utility. Now, the big change that's happened here is that telephony is no longer a utility with stations. It is a personal accessory that you carry on your body that happens to connect to wireless networks and allows you, through the infrastructure that's been established over the decades, to talk to people all over the world. Now, here's the important change here. Back when they began to automate switching in the telephone system, that is, make the switching using the dial. Remember the dial on the telephones? If you looked in the center of the dial, it said wait for dial tone. That was the user interface of the technology. And the telephone companies actually ran ads saying that we have to automate the telephone system because if we don't, most of the population will have to become telephone operators. Because they did the math and they found out that the growing telephone call volume would require so many people doing manual switching that you would have to have most of the population switching the calls for the rest of the population that weren't telephone operators. Now, of course, the interesting thing here is they got this exactly backwards. Automating the system made it necessary for everybody to become a telephone operator. Everybody who runs one of these things, owns one of these things, uses one of these things, is a telephone operator. Now, this is the big switch in productivity. And Jim alluded a few minutes ago to one of the challenges we have in the society, which is we now want to have higher education available to everybody. We don't have the money to do that under the old model. We're trying to find out new ways to do it, and a massive productivity improvement is really the only way that we're likely to achieve that. But the productivity with these kinds of technologies is very different from old productivity. If you look at productivity back to, say, the invention of farm mechanization, the idea was capital labor substitution. You took a job that formerly required a lot of people, and you had it done by fewer people. The difference in this is everybody does the job. You take a job that was formerly done by a few people, and you make everybody do it. That's the real productivity switch in the 20th century, particularly the latter part of the 20th century. As a result of this switch, and all of the primary infrastructures that we've built in the latter part of the 20th century have this feature. Transportation infrastructure, communication infrastructure, increasingly retailing, for that matter, are all putting more and more power into the hands of the end user. Well, this is the trajectory we're on with higher education, and education generally, for that matter. We're putting more and more power to be agents of learning in the hands of the learner than has ever been the case before. Now, of course, we're doing it rather awkwardly. We're not doing it very thoughtfully. But, and here I'll echo something Jim said, the University of Phoenix and other for-profit private institutions are actually ahead of this in a more interesting way than many of the traditional institutions like the University of Michigan, although our Flint and Dearborn campuses are ahead of the Ann Arbor campus in this. So this is a revolution that's taking place, but it's not being driven by the traditional higher education sector. It's being followed rather at a distance by the traditional higher education sector. And so that's sort of the takeaway message, that we are still stuck in the traditional higher education sector in a utility-based model where people come to us to get service. We are not doing what the cellular telephone revolution did and put that capacity in the hands of the individual person and essentially stopped our utility model as a result. And, we'll see what happens with that over time. But that's the big change that's going on in information and communication technology.
Would anyone on the panel like to make a comment on this very interesting discussion?
Did you want to respond?
No. Perhaps this is a good time to open the floor to you for discussion. If you we have about 10 minutes, but you will have another 10 minutes at the end of the morning's session. So please raise any questions you might have. Yes.
And identify yourself.
My name
Just
is,
wait for the mic.
My name is Prakash Ambegaonkar, and I'm from Beijing Nations University. I think I would like to add one thing that I didn't see in the discussion so far. Certainly, we all agree, and I'm a technologist. I'm a PhD in electrical engineering, so I'm driven by how we can use technology to make all of these major changes. I think what is really required as we go forward is to really change in morality of education. And more or less that becomes a change of this morality of the societies. As we all know that when the printing press happened, how much education expanded. We know when internet happened, how much education expanded. And that equalization or the flattening access. Like when I went to school, when I was growing up, in my village in India, there was only first grade education available. Then I had to walk to another place to get the second grade, then to another city to get the third grade, then go to another place to get up to the middle school, then another place to get to the high school, then another one to get to the college, and then I ended up in the US because that was my dream to come to US for postgraduate education. So what I would like to see that we truly believe in the idea that even in a village like this, because of the technology, because of the open source software, because of all the people working together in a globalized world, we can make the same education available to a village child in any remote part of the world, including Africa and all that. Same thing we offer in the best universities in the United States. And I think it has to be treated as a new morality. Unless we do it, the political forces that are underneath, that would not let you do the equalization. Because it truly is going to be not a zero-sum game, because you are getting something and you are losing something. Globalization, it is good, but there are winners and losers. So I think that is very, very important for all of us in this space to make that happen.
Yes.
Thank you. My name is Awok Shingeti. I'm with the International Institute of Islamic Thought here in Herndon, Virginia, and we are engaged in higher educational work throughout the world. As a matter of fact, we just embarked on a big project of establishing a university for the poor in northern Lebanon. I have a couple of quick questions. One of them for Mr. Matsuura. I hope I'm not pronouncing the name wrong. And the other one for Mr. James Duderstadt about the knowledge-based economy. The first question is about how good is the U.S. model. Well, we know that the U.S. model is very good. Most of us here, particularly those of us who came from poor countries and got a high education, we owe it to the goodness of the American system. However, there are questions now, and the question is the recent trend of outsourcing or actually establishing outfits for American universities in other countries, for example, in the Gulf. These are outfits which are established mainly for profit. Some of them are successful, some of them are not. Some actually just folded and came back. Compared to earlier models of American universities, which were established, like the American University in Cairo and the American University in Beirut, which are more mission-oriented. So we need to ask this question. How good is the American model as it is evolving and as it is now being introduced in different parts of the world, particularly in the Gulf area? That is the first question which I would like you to, since we talked about the good American model. The second one is about knowledge-based, and I just want to give you a different perspective related to knowledge-based economy, and ask a question, a challenge actually: how can we democratize knowledge-based institutions so that higher education would be more inclusive? Again, I came from a poor country, Sudan. I'm one of the privileged who got a higher education, and the percentage certainly was less than 5%. But at that time, if you are one of the brilliant students, you go to medicine or engineering. If you are not so good, then you go to social sciences, or as you mentioned, the pure sciences. But if you are up to no good, then you go to the military college. That is true. A lot of our generals now were high school graduates who couldn't make it to college. And then me, the brilliant guy who studied and this and that, I'm in my 30s or 40s, ended up working for the general because he staged a coup and got all his friends with him in a revolutionary command council or something like that. And I'm not saying this, it's a phenomenon. I mean, we all know that during the late 50s and 60s and up to the 70s, socially and politically, it's very attractive to join the military because you have a better chance of making it and having a good social status. And so those who are not bright have had a better chance of becoming socially and economically well off in those countries. So this is a challenge to the democratization of education. Why would I go to engineering or medicine or even any of the social sciences if chances are I will end up being a technocrat serving in a system that does not value my education? So this and then if you got a superpower who support the tyrant, then that compounds the problem. And so what can we do to truly democratize and the idea of a knowledge-based economy becomes universal across the world and not something that is just limited to the Western educational system?
We will take one more comment and then ask the panelists to respond. If there is no more, then yes.
If I may ask a question. This is the inevitable question of the Luddite, so I will ask the Luddite's question. What is lost in this transformation? this dissemination, this online learning, virtual learning communities, and so forth. How effective are these new technologies, these new learning technologies, and is something or is anything lost in this transformation?
Very interesting questions. I don't know who feel who would like to respond to some of the questions. Would you like to go first about the goodness of U.S. model?
Well, let me answer the first question raised by him. When I said the United States higher institutions have provided a very good model to other countries, in particular to other developed countries, I was thinking of American universities in the United States. I was not thinking of American universities established in other countries. And you are not wrong in arguing American universities are not very successful in operating American universities established in other countries. You have quoted the example of Gulf countries. I must confess, I have not done in-depth assessment of these universities in other countries. Therefore, what I am saying is merely my impressionistic assessment. They have established several universities, several campuses in Japan as well, but they have not succeeded. Why have they not succeeded? While they are very successful in accepting foreign students in the United States, providing them with high level quality education. This is something I must look into more carefully. Nevertheless, I would argue they have not been able to meet local needs sufficiently. When foreign students come to the United States, they come here with an expectation, with a strong expectation that they would get an American type education, and therefore they are ready to study together with American students in American universities. But when American universities establish their campuses in other countries, students who come to these universities expect to get more localized education, more how should I say, more localized education, meeting local needs, which the American universities are not able to provide in these campuses established abroad. That is my impression.
Let me follow on to that because I couldn't agree more. I think that American institutions have been very effective in providing opportunities on their campuses for international students, and have entered into some mutually beneficial partnerships, but with campuses overseas. On the other hand, it has been a dismal failure to attempt to generate resources that have a major impact by establishing outposts. And I think that's because American universities, for the most part, are not very good about putting together an effective business plan. I have only to point to intercollegiate athletics to note what a fool's errand it is to try and make money off of these activities. However, I will give a counterexample of that, which also addresses your question. Several years ago, one of my colleagues, who was president at MIT, challenged his faculty to develop a plan to market MIT's reputation and scholarly materials, which were primarily in digital form. And after a year's worth of consideration, the MIT faculty said, let's instead give it to the world. And that was the birth of the open courseware movement, where they were able to put together some foundation support to put the digital assets behind about 2,000 of their courses into the web. There are over 1,000 universities around the world right now that are engaged in that. My university is putting its medical curriculum into the public domain primarily for developing economies, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa. So there's an altruistic character in parallel with this other less successful effort to actually generate resources through globalization. In fact, there is serious consideration right now of opening up intellectual property either having faculty and students sign licenses like Creative Commons to create things in the public domain, or even the concept of open source universities where they stay away from patenting activity and give it to the world initially, although there are economists that tell us that may not be successful. So I think the culture of universities are very much much more to look at it as a public good and a responsibility to provide those assets as broadly as possible, rather than to have a monopoly to focus them on gains of the institution. Now, that's not all institutions, but the problem is you sometimes get trapped in practice, and that's happened in this country where universities, I think, mistakenly regard themselves as businesses more as public goods. And as a result, I might say because of that, while people have looked to the United States as a leader, particularly at the high end, their research universities, they're rapidly evolving universities in Asia and in Europe that are challenging very effectively American institutions. And the other thing I would add is that while American higher education at the research university level is viewed by the world as the gold standard right now, although, as I say, it's being challenged, the rest of American higher education has very serious trouble. When graduation rates are less than 50%, where we are inadequately serving even our existing population right now. So the American model is beginning to creak and groan, and it may not be the model that the rest of the world wants to emulate. But the culture of viewing education as a public good that the world village needs, and that's a responsibility of academic institutions, is, I think, one that we should continue to encourage.
Yes.
Well, I'd be happy to address the Luddites question, which I have a different answer to after listening to John, who gave me a genuine aha moment. So I'm done for the day. Thank you.
Is that easy?
Yeah, yeah, it's that easy sometimes. I think the issue is that the question is framed incorrectly. After listening to John, the question is not what is lost, but what is gained or what is different. Because as I think about the use of mobile phones, I don't think about it in terms of what I've lost, but what gains there are. I think if we look at technology in general, the question is, what's the value added? What does it bring to higher education? And I think there were just a couple of things that I realize in my daily work, and that the first is access. That folks who would not have access to higher education, even if they could afford it, they might not be able to go to a physical campus. I think the technology provides the networks by which knowledge will be distributed, using examples like Facebook, for instance. Certainly those kinds of networks now exist. University of Phoenix is a network of more than 1 million people, if you take our current students and our graduates, who have the ability to work with each other. So I think what technology brings is an alternative path for people, because increasingly what we need to see higher education as is a set of paths to the goal of becoming educated. And I think technology enhances our ability to highlight those paths for people.
If I could just follow up, maybe the way to frame the question is twofold. One is how effective are online learning techniques, and second, I'm a former professor. Until last year, I was teaching in a classroom, and I was increasingly feeling that I wasn't sure how to communicate with my students. So, and maybe we're going to get to this later, I guess, is sort of new learning styles. But do we have to, as professors, learn new ways of teaching? I mean, is there a whole new pedagogy involved in this?
Yes, is the answer. In that online teaching, I think certainly teaching is an art as opposed to to the knowledge that we transfer. And the art is different online than it is in the classroom. And I think we were discussing this just before we started, that many institutions who look at online learning as an add-on are not very successful at it. In fact, some very high-profile universities have been very unsuccessful at it, primarily because it's not simply a matter of translating what happens in the classroom online. So we have an extensive training program for faculty who come to the university, regardless of background. I was a research professor for 20 years, and before I could and a damn good one. But before I could teach at University of Phoenix, I had to go through training that taught me not only about adult learning principles, but about the art of teaching online.
The other thing to remember is that while we talk a lot about teaching, our real focus is learning. And at many of our institutions, much more of the learning occurs student to student than it does faculty to student. So the old saying that the sage on the stage is being challenged to become the guide on the side is increasingly what this technology is demanding, to form learning communities, may have faculty presence, but is very much carried by student interaction as well, and how to nurture that, how to stimulate it. And that requires a way, an approach that is quite different than the way that we produce faculty today.
I'd add one thing to this. There's two facts that are worth knowing about this. One is there's a tremendous amount of hyperbole that surrounds this stuff. There's something called the National Education Technology Plan 2010 that was just put out by the U.S. Department of Education. And it contains in it a comment that learning sciences teach us how people learn, or have shown us how people learn, sort of needs that nations and countries have shown us what people need to learn, and technology now makes it possible for us to do that. Not a single one of those statements is true. Those are all hugely overstated, but we are learning more all the time. And this is the problem I have with a lot of my colleagues. They ask the same question. And I ask them, what is your last experience with online learning? And they say about 10 years ago. And I said, well, there was actually a big revolution in that business in the last 2 or 3 years, where a lot of corners got turned and things got much better. So that's one fact that's important, is that we're learning all the time and we're getting better at it. The second one is the vast majority of online learning experiences are not with people who are entirely remote from the educational institution. Most of them happen to people who are already enrolled in face-to-face courses, right? So what happens with online learning is supplemental to the face-to-face courses. That's where it's been most successful so far. So, there is a deep art and a deep lore and a deep, long accumulated capability in face-to-face learning, which is extremely valuable. It's a kind of social tacit knowledge capability. This thing is one that's relatively new. And we haven't developed that kind of capability, but we're developing it much more quickly than people think.
Do you feel your Luddite question has been sufficiently answered? We'll move on to the fourth issue that we have planned, and that concerns globalization of commerce and culture. And to lead off the discussion is Dr. President Kawaguchi of Ritsumeikan University in Kyoto, or Japan. The Ritsumeikan University is an institution in East Asia which has been one of the most open institutions toward the globalization and so forth. So, Dr. Kawaguchi.
Thank you, Chairman. Also, thank you for Wilson Center and Kyung University. And this is a very precious opportunity for us, the Japanese president, because we talk about every issue every time. So this is very important and very rare opportunity for us, the Japanese president. And anyway, just allow me to introduce my university itself. Ritsumeikan is not only just a university. This is like an educational conglomerate. We have 2 universities and 4 junior and high schools and 1 elementary school. and we have altogether 46,000 students. That's one of the biggest education institutions in Japan. And also, another university is called Ritsumeikan Asia Pacific University. It's established in the year of 2000. It's when the centennial anniversary of Ritsumeikan University itself. And the university is just a truly international university in Japan. We have 6,000 students. Half of them are from all over the world, 97 countries and regions. That is a very rare case in Japan. That is a very important experience for us and Japanese international higher education. Anyway, I return to the issue, the globalization, commerce, and culture. The most important impact on universities of the globalization, commerce, and culture must be the change of core mission of university. The core mission of the university is now to foster young people to human resources for global economy. That is one side. And another side is foster young people to global citizens. So the university is now changing their curriculum and teaching content and systems much more standardized in international standards. For example, social sciences such as economics, business administration, accounting, almost all over the world, the same content, same textbook. And so that is one side. But another side, we are thinking, we must think about, do we have to another mission to create national identity among young people? Formerly, maybe many universities teach the local, the national culture, national literature, and national philosophy, many national culture, and then the young people becoming getting some national identity. That is now we have. How do we have to do that? Or should we still follow the mission? That is one question, maybe. But another situation, another side of the situation, many universities and many researchers and students are now getting more and more interested in the cultural diversity. And they want to know more local cultures. This is Mr. Matsuura should know about more. For example, our university is located in Kyoto. Kyoto has a long tradition of Japanese cultures. We have tea ceremonies, we have flower arrangement, and we have so many literatures. But now that we recall these local traditional heritages and to discover local heritages and to teach to the students. But this is not focused on national identity. That is more focusing on local. That is we have to more discuss about that. So anyway, the mainstream in the university, especially Japanese universities, now standardizing the teaching system and educational curriculum and everything about that. And also, the standardizing is, of course, across over the borders. As we know, in Europe, they have the Bologna process, and they standardize all the nations' higher education. Now, in East Asia, Japan and China and Korea, these governments have started to discuss about the standard of the higher education in university. I don't know this will be succeeded, but anyway, we have to do something because, for example, a Japanese company try to recruit their staff in local area. For example, in China and India, they need their staff in the local people. So they need the standard type of some educated people. So the Japanese companies need to standard in China and Korea and India. So this process should be promoting, but this is still difficult issues that we have still so many domestic and national characteristics in higher education, especially in humanities and even low education. We have some very national characteristics. So this is still difficult issues, but we have to create some standard. But at the same time, we have to endeavor to maintain our cultural diversity. That is my opinion.
So thank you very much, Dr. Kawaguchi. Would anyone like to take up on what?
I would comment. The question that came up earlier, I think, is quite important, which is the connection between learning and the local. I think it's important to remember that learning is very political. Mm-hmm. In all societies, learning is very political. And the most extreme cases that we see about that, some of which are right here in the United States, about what is appropriate to teach people, kind of enforce that political dimension. And, Tip O'Neill famously said, all politics is local. So the idea that there's some sort of universal education, universal knowledge, universal truth is an academic conceit that's very problematic in production and has historically been misread by leaders, particularly in elite institutions, as though what people were coming there for was the truth, when what people were coming there for was to become members of that local community. Because that local, for example, going to Harvard, to become a member of the Harvard community, you don't go to Harvard to become something other than Harvard. You go to Harvard to become something like Harvard, because becoming something like Harvard is very much in your interest for the rest of your life. So it's easy to flip the causality on this and make it seem as though what we're talking about with these highly political local institutions is somehow universal. It's just the opposite. They're very, very local. And this question is a very interesting question, I think.
We're beginning to get into a very controversial area, perhaps somebody. We'll come back to this question during the general discussion. I think the last last issue is one of demographic changes, how the universities are meeting the lifelong educational needs of people in the knowledge-based society in post-industrial age. And we have Dr. Pepicello, the president of Phoenix University, to lead off the discussion.
Okay, thank you very much. I will speak primarily from the United States perspective, but perhaps some of the remarks will translate more globally. I think the short answer is that we're not doing it nearly as well as we ought to be. And I think there are two aspects of that answer, because actually there's never a short answer if you're an academic. There's only a bottom line and then the story that goes with it. But I think there are two issues that we look at University of Phoenix, and that is because we are looked at as one of the leading educators of working adults, which was the founding mission of the university, was to provide access originally for firemen and policemen in the San Jose, California area in the early 70s who were reaching retirement age and who had no access to higher education so that they would have something to do when they retired. And that was the kernel that was planted from which the university grew to where it is today. But the first aspect of why we need to look harder at lifelong learning and the effect of demographics has to do with who our students are today. One of the things that we know is that only about 27% of undergraduates in the United States today are enjoying the Michigan experience on campus. That in fact 73% of people who are or could be accessing higher education do not fit that mold, cannot fit that mold, and we need to look at who those students are. One of the things that is true about traditional higher education in the United States is that I think it by and large does a good job of educating the students who go there, and the reason is somewhat straightforward in that students who go to public or even private institutions of higher education meet a set of admission standards, and those admission standards tell the institutions who the people are who are coming to them, so they know lots of information that informs how they educate and serve those students. However, one of the things I point out to my colleagues, much to their chagrin frequently, is that admissions requirements aren't really designed to let people in. They're designed to keep people out. And as our education infrastructure creaks, as it was put, I think, so aptly, we see more and more of that. So the issue with the 73% of students is that since they don't meet traditional admissions requirements, we don't know much about them, and subsequently don't know much about the best ways to educate and serve them. What we do know about them generally is that they're older, usually in their early 30s or perhaps late 20s. We know that many of them are first-generation students, which means they're the first person in their family to go to college. We know that by and large they are working. We know that by and large they have families, and that their access to higher education is one that requires it to be integrated into their lives in the way that the rest of society is integrated. And the examples I frequently use are those of banking. I like the people who work at my bank. They're very pleasant, but I don't want to talk to them. By and large, I want them to help me complete transactions that are useful to me, and I want them to be there if I have a problem. So banking is very accessible. Shopping is accessible. one rarely needs to go into a department store unless one likes to go in and touch things and try things on. And increasingly, what we call the next generation student, who's that person that I just described, is expecting that higher education will be as accessible as the rest of the world. Now I speak sort of from both sides of the fence here. As a traditional academic, I certainly understand the tradition, what would have been the separateness of higher education previously. But increasingly, our students expect that the world is there, that it's a click away, and that includes knowledge. And one of the things that, and we may talk about this later, what the future university looks like, is that knowledge is accessible. The quality of that knowledge, if one looks at something like Wikipedia, for instance, is probably uneven, to say the best. But higher education is missing an opportunity, I think, to control and provide quality access. And we need to, in order to do that, we need to know who that 73% is, how they think, how they learn, and what their needs are. To give you a basic example, when I came to the University of Phoenix, which was 1995, the profile of our common student was a white, Caucasian, middle manager, male, about 35 years old. Today, the university, and we were about 60% male. Today, the university is about 57% female. We're approaching 40% in minority students. And the importance of that is that when you're the size of University of Phoenix, those numbers tell us that something has shifted fundamentally in the United States, and that we need to be able, as a community in higher education, to adapt to something that has shifted around us. Now, that certainly doesn't mean that our existing institutions are irrelevant. I think that's exactly wrong-headed. Do we need to look at the infrastructure? Probably. And I think some of the forward-looking remarks that we already heard today from our colleagues tell us that we are looking in that direction. But that will ultimately be the key to how we better serve an increasingly large segment of our students in higher education. The second piece that we need to look at, especially in the United States, and again, this was brought up earlier, is that we're living significantly longer. If we talk about lifelong learning in the United States, pretty much we look at anyone who was over the age of 55 or 60 as someone who might come back to the community college for some art courses or for personal development, but it was looked at as sort of an add-on to higher education. Increasingly, there's a generation of which I am a member who may well live into our 90s, and higher education is not going to know what to do with us. We're not geared to educate people what to do when you live that long, how to manage finances, how to increase your basic participation in intellectual endeavors. And I think there's a real need for us now to begin to look at what that structure will look like, because otherwise we'll never retire and your kids won't ever have jobs. So you want to help us have something to do as we retire. And I think sort of incumbent upon what I've said, and this is where I'll end, it comes back to, again, the remarks about cellular telephony, and that is one of the things that we need to look at as we look at lifelong learning is how we personalize it. Because, as I mentioned, we need to know who the students are who are coming to us, how they think, what their life is like, so that we can tailor a curriculum that's relevant to that person. And that's whether you're part of the 73%, what I call the next generation students, or whether we're anticipating the needs of those of us who will retire and continue to populate society. And I think that's essential to what we're doing. So the long answer comes to the conclusion that we know what we have to do. There are people out there, there are organizations who are doing what I'm talking about. You know them all, and you visit them regularly. Places like Google and Yahoo, who have sites that learn about you every time you go there, so that when you say, gee, I like this pen, I think I'll buy it, and it says, if you like that pen, you're probably going to like this kind of bottled water. Is there any reason why higher education platforms shouldn't be able to adapt to the people, to the students who come there for help in a variety of ways, not just in consumer ways, but in learning styles, for instance, in preferences for materials. And I think those are the sorts of things that we have access to now, and it's a matter of integrating them into that evolving higher education infrastructure.
Thank you, Dr. Pepicello. Any comments? Yes.
Yeah, these comments, I think, are really important because this transition occurring from what one of my colleagues calls just-in-case learning, where we package education for the young, hoping they'll use some of what they learn later, to just-in-time learning, which meets the needs of the marketplace, to just-for-you learning, which is where you see the future, highly customized learning experiences. I think those are the big themes that will meet the needs of the world, but also will challenge our institutions.
I just want to make a comment about the importance of longevity. It's sort of a two-stage thing. In the 20th century, human lifespan increased on average in developed countries by 50%. Now, because all of that life was added on to the end of life rather than the beginning, the net effect of that was an effective doubling of the number of years at work. That occurred in the 20th century. Not only that, quality-adjusted lifespan grew faster than lifespan, largely because of routine medical interventions. Those of you who are around my age will remember when you were young going into drugstores and seeing a large collection of canes to assist people walking. You actually have to look hard to find the canes now because arthroscopic surgery and other techniques have eliminated knee problems that used to be ubiquitous in people over 45 years of age. You are much more able to live an active life now at a later age than was the case in certainly the early half of the 20th century. And as a result, and this goes back to the point about lifelong learning, it's not just lifelong learning, it's that life itself is different now. It's much longer. For many people, it's much more active. They remain engaged much longer than has historically been the case. And none of the social institutions that have evolved over a period of several hundred years are prepared for this. The social institutions expect people to die earlier, and they don't. So this is a very interesting and strange problem.
Our discussion so far has been concentrated on educational aspect of the many transformative challenges which the university is facing. One of the main functions or main missions of the university is production of new knowledge. And I would very much like to hear some comments on how these transformative challenges are affecting the ability or inability to produce new knowledge that would really move the societies of the future.
Well, clearly, the generation knowledge scholarship has broken loose from the campus as it did so long ago, and the typical faculty member will have more interactions during the day with colleagues in Europe and Asia than across the hall. So, that I think the challenge is what is done with that knowledge. The global scholarly communities have kind of set in, and that's the way that most scholarship works. But the pressure on institutions to determine new ways to propagate that knowledge into society, and obviously they are supported by society for a reason, is a big challenge right now. I think one of the things that the topic that was given to me earlier, the knowledge economy, is doing, is it is putting enormous pressure on institutions to develop new ways, and they're measured in part by this, to actually stimulate economic development. And again, we're at a very early stage of that in many fields, although in some fields like agriculture we've been in it for a long time. And we're trying to determine how to do that to augment our traditional values and contributions without competing directly with those. And that's a real challenge for institutions.
So we will now open the floor for discussion. Yes, you had your hand up.
We've just been joined by Ben Wildowski over here, who's written the new book, The Great Brain Race. I've told him if he wrote it 20 years ago, it would have been called The Great Brain Drain. I do want to add
Identify yourself.
Joe Duffy. I do want to add, however, the concept of the objective of education to understand. And I think that's where we need to begin. I say to our students in this country now, they're hearing a word in our faltering economy, stimulus. That's nothing new, except we used to call it war. And most of the research that has developed the technology, first of all, in the United States, we did have the land-grant universities, but our jump ahead in education was essentially inspired by the Russians firing the first satellites, and then the National Defense Education Act, of which we began to train scholars and teachers we needed to expand higher education. And most of the technology that Dr. King has described, and the later versions of it, and the Silicon Valley's basis, was essentially inspired by, or essentially funded by DARPA, not by industry, but in the sex of the Cold War. So I think one task that's on all of us together, because this is a remarkable gathering to talk about the future, is helping students understand that history does not have to be tragic, but perhaps we need to understand it by an understanding of recent human experience, human nature and history, and seeing that basis. I think that's the best hope for sustainability, too. It's another issue there, but I just want to add it there.
Who had here?
Thank you. My name is Sang-Jin Choue. Today I'm so happy to be here because I studied at the Graduate Institute for Peace Studies at Kyung University 20 years ago. I'm working at a UN NGO, toward fostering racial harmony and ending poverty. So I have a little bit, not negative one, a little bit, so ongoing issue, in university. For example, I want to know, your opinions. Like, number one is academic research or education conflict, especially method conflict between European style and North American style. And second one is a very serious medical research conflict between Oriental or alternative medicine and Western medicine. And also, incompleted future task, such as, like illegal immigrant families, especially children's opportunity to apply, university, especially legal or medical school, including scholarship also. And finally, so ongoing racism issues, like among scholars and students, and university administrators. So I have had so helping out several scholars and university students whom suffered from racism currently in university. So for the future development of university, what do you think about it?
There was a hand up back there. Yes, so would you go first?
My name is Ya Feng Xia. I'm a professor of history at Long Island University in Brooklyn, New York, and also currently I'm a public policy scholar at the Wilson Center. My question is to Dr. Poppy Channel. It's about online learning or online teaching. Do you think that online teaching or online learning is successful for traditional students, let's say students from 18 to 22? Now, we do understand that online training is successful for adults. And also, at your university, how you create a university culture now, which people go to Harvard, go to Princeton, go to Georgetown or other university, Maryland, they have their culture. Now, how you create a university culture? If I may, I also see that from your bio that you were trained as a scholar of classic and linguistics. Now, how you yourself prepare for the current job as a scholar of classic, and now you become a president with a very advanced knowledge in science and technology. Because I'm a history professor, so I'm very interested in that. Thank you very much.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Henry Heilbrunn. Thank you very much for your thoughts about the future. Could each of you focus on what the impediments are that would be obstacles towards actually implementing that future that you describe, whether it's the transformative university or it's democratization or cultural identity or actually extending the learning that you have at University of Phoenix?
If there are...
Maybe we should answer these and then do another.
Yes, but would you?
My name is Cristina Marin, and I've been an adjunct faculty for the University of Phoenix for the past 8 years. I was hired as, when I started, and still now, I am a business consultant in my real life. But when I applied for the University of Phoenix to become adjunct faculty online, I emphasized in my interview my 15 years experience as a traditional academic in a university in Europe. The person interviewing me was really less interested in my face-to-face experience, but was interested in my business experience. And soon after I was accepted, I understood why. Because I went through a very rigorous training program in which I had to learn everything from scratch. I really did not forget everything I had practiced in my face-to-face teaching, but teaching online is really, as Dr. Porcello said, it is an art. Well, not only online, but also face-to-face. I really drew from my experience as a former radio broadcaster when I started teaching, because sending out that message with the answer to the student, be it an undergrad student or a grad student, was equal to me as being on a hot mic. You wrote the word, you clicked send, and it went out there. You had to be very conscious of what you are writing because you do not know your audience. You do not know very well your audience in the class. You have the gesture, you have the silences, you have the other dramatics of teaching in class. But online, you have to be very, very focused on what you are saying out there. This was number one of my comment. The second comment is that I noticed in these years that UOP, both online and on ground, focuses not only on customizing the programs for the students, which is really very challenging and encouraging, but also keeping the faculty in sync with all the developments in the higher education trend, workshops, changing the IT look, the platform that we use in online teaching, which is really very rewarding for us because we have the tools at the fingertips. So it is a model that works, and I want to end to say that it does produce quality students. The other day, I received an email from one of my undergrad students in 2007 saying, I'm now going for the master's. Not at UOP. He's going to George Mason University. But I think it's equally important because the value of the knowledge he got to UOP, he's taking it further to pursue the next level of higher education. Thank you.
Thank you. We have two more hands, and I think we will close there and give the panel opportunity to respond. There was somebody back there.
My name is Iqbal Yunus. I didn't hear anybody speak about the university's role as a grantor of credentials. I suspect a lot of students go to a university to get a piece of paper called the diploma or the degree. And they think, they do a lot of learning, of course, because they have to earn that. But many times that learning is not what they want to learn or what they need to learn. They know that once they get the piece of paper, then they will do the learning as they go through life. So I just wanted to ask, how is that changing? And the other thing is that in the lifelong learning business, it's a little different because a lot of people do lifelong learning for self-enrichment, and their purpose is not credentialing. In a sense, they're more motivated because they're doing it for self-enrichment. They're not doing it for just hurrying out get a piece of paper. Now for those who are not adult learners but are regular learners, traditional learners in a lifelong learning process, what is the comparative worth of the credentials from a traditional university and from that other model that we've been talking about? So the two questions quickly are how the credential process is changing and what is the comparative worth of the credentials that people get. Thank you.
Yes. You too.
Some of the changes that we discuss are going to require financial resources, and then the question comes prioritization. So in terms of, if you look at the whole lifespan learning kind of a thing, would you rather take the same resources spend on the younger learners, or would you really spend for a small class of older learners? Because like in the case of healthcare, as we know, most of the 80% healthcare is spent on the last few years of life. And my wife says, look, don't spend any of that stuff on my thing. Donate that money to educate children in the world. how many more we could do. So what I would like to do is how would we make such critical, sort of difficult decisions as a president of the university or the legislators or the policy makers?
The young lady back there, I'll give you a chance to say something.
My name is Hwan Song, and I'm from Creative Associates International. Right now, we're developing a program that allows our employees to access courses online. My question has to do with lifelong learning. Right now, our employees are, how can we influence them and motivate them to want to continue learning? Because right now, the website's not so popular. Everyone has their schedule. They have their own projects to finish and time to deal with personal issues, and they don't have time to kind of devote to self-improvement and learning. How can we motivate them to want to learn more?
It seems many of the questions, comments have been directed to Dr. Pepicello, if I'm not mistaken. And so you start responding, perhaps others.
Okay, sure. And I'll start with the gentleman down here who had the most questions. Clearly, at the University of Phoenix, the focus is on online learning. Go back to the comment about the sage on the stage and the guide on the side. Despite the fact that we're known for our size, the average class size, whether online or in a physical classroom at the university, is about 15 students. So it's a highly interactive, faculty-facilitated model, which can focus on learning, and again, as was mentioned earlier, not just with the faculty member disseminating knowledge, but student-to-student knowledge. I mean, because especially when you're dealing with adults, everyone brings a rich life experience, and in many cases they bring work experience to the classroom. And so when we focus on learning, that is one of the key elements that allows us to do that. That in turn answers your question about culture, because if you walk onto a University of Phoenix physical campus, you will feel the culture. I had the opportunity to go to many of them. In fact, on Saturday I did a graduation at our Metro Detroit campus. 1,400 people graduated, and I will assure you there was culture abounding. As for online, I would invite any of you who have the ability to come to Phoenix on this Friday and Saturday when we will have our online graduation. We will graduate probably about 5,000 or 6,000 students who will fly in for graduation from all over the world. And I will assure you there will be 3 days full of culture. Because online, it has its own culture. It's a community, as we were talking about earlier. And our students see themselves as part of that learning community. Just as much, and again, it's not the greatest analogy, but it's like people who are on Facebook or MySpace, where there's a community there. Those people know each other, they know about each other, and we'll find the same thing will be true at our graduations, where students will come together face to face for the first time often, and we'll see that. And the last piece was, how in the world did I get from classical studies to the president of University of Phoenix? Actually, it's a tribute to the University of Phoenix, which is oftentimes reviled as being a business, in that if I were at a traditional university, you wouldn't think to ask me that question. Many presidents were previously the dean of arts and sciences, as a matter of fact, and I was too at the university. And so I think that in this case, my path is not so unusual, so there's hope. If you aspire to do this, I think I'll be quiet.
Yeah. Let me respond, if I could, to 3 of the questions. One is credentialing. One is how you pay for this. And the third one is how to transform universities or stimulate revolution. Okay. The first one, credentialing. Universities have 3 core competencies. They provide access to knowledge, faculty, libraries, laboratories. They assist in creating learning communities, students and faculty in classes, student communities, so forth. And the third one is that they certify that knowledge and skills have been acquired, but they also certify the viability of that knowledge itself. All three of these are changing very, very rapidly. What we're finding, particularly in professional schools in which life or death issues must be dealt with by professions, I think of medicine, increasingly engineering and so forth, competency certification is now beginning to replace class time or the courses taught. And I think the challenge there is to develop ways to assess whether an individual, a student, really has acquired the competency to turn loose on the world as a profession. You're seeing that first in the professions. Obviously, it's much more difficult to assess whether that learning, those attributes have been achieved at the undergraduate level. That was one of the issues that came before the Spellings Commission. And I think many of us were very apprehensive that a simple-minded approach to that would work. But I think of the three areas, many universities believe that this certification of knowledge, of skills, of the accuracy of knowledge is perhaps in the fallback position their one real value added. And as open courseware and so forth begins to spread, they're dropping back to this and trying to think of it more strategically. How do you pay for it? Peter Drucker a number of years ago said that maybe you ought to look at it like Social Security. Maybe rather than setting aside a certain part of your income every year to pay for your retirement, the end of life, maybe you ought to set it aside to pay for the value of life you have throughout your life. And that's being done in some countries. The Australian model of using tax collections to provide income-dependent repayment for education seems to have worked quite well, and it's being extended to many countries. You could even add to that, I suppose, the issue of entitlement, where a person could borrow from government sources or whatever a certain amount, and then using some very transparent and easy way to have income contingent repayment. It's a cultural change, but in a world in which mother and father are enrolled in college themselves, they're not going to have much leftover income to pay for the education of their children. So maybe you ought to essentially have most of the payback occur from the added value in terms of income and so forth that education provides. And so it's a structural change. The third one is, how does transformation occur? As a former university president, I always used to hear the old saying that the challenge is that universities change one grave at a time. That's not right. You look at the American experience, and universities have changed in extraordinary ways over a very short period of time. I think the Land-Grant Acts, the GI Bill, when the soldiers came back from World War II, the partnership between research universities and the federal government. Someone mentioned the National Defense Education Act earlier. So there have been moments in which external forces have driven change in institutions. I look at a complex institution like my own, and while in the core arts and humanities it may look fairly stable, you look at professions like medicine or engineering or business, and they change very, very fast because they have to interact with societies and may remain relevant to societies that also change very, very fast. Think of universities as very loosely coupled, grassroots-driven collections of entrepreneurs, because that's what our faculty members really are. And if required to change, they can change very, very rapidly. And our experience has been in the past, sometimes takes incentive, but national policy can drive those changes. And the final comment I would make is that's where the United States right now is in significant difficulty, because most of the rest of the world have set very ambitious national policies for the advancement of their higher education establishment. And in the United States, we treat it in a laissez-faire way. At the national level, it's set at the local and regional level. And as a result, our institutions, while perhaps responsive to local concerns, in some ways are moving farther and farther away from national needs.
I must now look to Dr. Michel for guidance. What do we do? Do we close here or?
Well, do people, any more we have a few minutes, and we have a generous amount of time for lunch, so if the conversation wants to continue naturally.
Well,
I actually have a question I wanted. Did you want to answer?
Yeah, I just want to make a comment about the question that was raised about alternative, what are in this country seen to be as alternative kinds of medicine. There's been a fairly significant change in medical education in the United States, and it's tied to a significant change in medical practice, which is called evidence-based medicine. And it's not a very sophisticated concept. You would think that people in the health professions would have been doing this all along, and they have been in their way. But it's a focus on what works, and it's sort of like programming an analog computer. You fiddle with the dials and you look at the outputs, and you fiddle with the dials and you look at the outputs. And this has done a tremendous amount to lower barriers to alternative treatments, because all treatments are sort of subject to this empirical test. So if you look at what's happened with evidence-based medicine in practice, and then the shift of the National Institutes of Health to what's called translational medicine, which is a very big change, which is getting science into practice much more quickly than has historically been the case. It's been a fairly substantial revolution. It hasn't been a change in ideology as much as it's been a change in routine practice that has simply pushed the ideological issues much more off the table than they've historically been. And this Jim mentioned that we've seen a lot of changes in social institutions. I think the change in health practice in the United States is probably the biggest shock of my life. I never would have imagined when I was in my 30s in the 1980s that I would see the kind of change that we've seen in health professions in the United States, but they've really been turned entirely upside down, and they're nothing like they used to be. And partly that's because they've become actually effective. Prior to that, the health professions in the United States were much more for symbolic and show purposes. They actually didn't know very much about how to make people better. But now they're becoming much more effective, and this is becoming a much more serious business. So, I think that's the large social change that's happening in that. And of course it affects an institution like ours, which has a big health sciences component to it.
I just wanted to ask two questions, really. One is, where does research fit in? For example, in your university, I mean, I come, in traditional universities, the marriage between research and teaching is a very close one, and it's assumed that the two kind of reinforce one another. So if you have I think there are two developments here that are affecting it. One is that research is taking place outside of universities increasingly, as well as within universities. And that sort of relates to the issue that Jim mentioned, I think, earlier, which is how do you make sure you keep feeding back the results of knowledge production into universities, but also in universities that are not set up with traditional faculty structures with tenure and so forth. How do adjunct professors conduct conduct research? How is their research supported and so forth? Where's the space for research in an online university? That's one question. And then the other has to do with something that came up, I think, between Dr. Kawaguchi and Dr. King, and that is, it's wonderful to think about democratizing learning and making it accessible all over the world, but then you do have this conflict maybe between local standards and universal standards. I know in my department, I was teaching in a history department, the American caucus, which was only part of the faculty, couldn't agree on what should be on the list of required readings for the comprehensive exams. And we had many, many meetings and finally said we couldn't even do it. So that's just an example of one small case. If you can't achieve consensus in one department, how do you achieve worldwide consensus about what constitutes the appropriate curriculum for X, Y, or Z? So how what are you thinking about that?
Let me just make an observation about this latter question. The Texas Public School Textbook Choice Committee has given us a really interesting example of this, I think. This is a group that's been dominated by some very conservative members. It's an elected committee. And their concern is, of course, with the truth. Now, of course, everybody is concerned with the truth. I've never heard anybody say, we really have to start teaching these things that we know to be false. Right? I've never heard anybody say that. So what's happened is they've imposed an expectation of what I would call conservative studies on Texas K-12 education. And to say that they are like women's studies and Hispanic studies and African American studies would, of course, infuriate them because that's what they think they stand against. But, in fact, that's what they're doing. They're imposing conservative studies on this group. Knowledge has become a very pluralistic phenomenon. This is the political dimension of it. And my wife works in the history department, and the Americanists at Michigan are just like you described. They can't agree on what the core readings for comprehensive exams should be. And, of course, nobody has the authority anymore to say, this is the canon. This is the truth about knowledge. And you can debate whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it's very much a feature of the higher education world now. And this is, to some extent, a result of pluralism and diversity. As you admit more voices into the discussion, you should expect them to agree less. And they do. They agree less.
Yeah, we have same problem that in the university. We have long discussion about that, but gradually the things are changing to get more importance on the global standard. That is the Japanese university situation. There's still long discussion, long dispute.
Yeah, to come back to the question about the role of research at our university, we have always been a teaching university and have not been, nor have we aspired to be, a research university of the type that's represented here. Now, that said, we have for as long as I've been at the university, because actually I'm the person who put it in place there, used a Boyer model. So that we realize that if we have professors who are teaching in their disciplines, and many of these are professors who actually teach at research universities who come to us on an adjunct basis, that what they are doing is participating in research as they are participating in the university as instructors. So what we have done is provided opportunities to them to participate as a community of scholars, so that they can come together in cohorts and discuss areas that are of interest to them. We now have a fairly robust doctoral school where faculty can work with students to further knowledge. And then most recently, and this came in large part from it's something I mentioned earlier, is that we've had institutions come to us who want to partner with the university because we have, because of our scale and our available resources, the ability to do things that some traditional universities don't. They've wanted to come to us and work on research projects, and we have implemented an organization which, again, will essentially be a community of scholars that we're calling the Phoenix Institute, which will be sort of a think tank where people can come and work on a variety of projects, either funded or unfunded, starting in our areas of strength, which will be adult learning, but then moving, we hope, to other areas as scholars continue to come to us.
Fortunately, we have an afternoon session. You can save your interesting questions and comments for the afternoon. I would like to thank all the panelists for their very exciting contributions, and the audience for the very rich range of questions and interests you have expressed. Thank you very much.